Aboard the Galactic Alliance flagship Serenity of Thought, a quiet tension filled the air as Captain Zrak of the Siltari adjusted his shimmering diplomatic sash. With 6 ice stalks twitching in anticipation, he surveyed the long banquet hall, where 24 species had gathered for what was meant to be a peaceful cultural exchange. The Siltari, a noble and ancient jellyfish-like species, with a deep respect for formality and etiquette, had worked tirelessly to ensure this moment went perfectly. The hall was beautifully arranged. Hovering crystal lights floated like soft stars, and translation drones buzzed gently above each guest. Everything was in place. And then, through the grand doors at the far end of the room, came the Terran representative ambassador, Linda Martinez. She walked with an easy, cheerful stride, carrying something in both hands, a ceramic dish, steaming with heat and filled with some kind of writhing, red-stained strings. Captain Zrak's central eye twitched in confusion. His first thought was that it might be a Terran offering, perhaps, a biological sample or a thermal-based art piece. But before he could inquire, Linda sat down, unwrapped a piece of cloth from a metal rod with sharp points, something the humans called a fork, and began to twirl the red strands around it in tight spirals. Zrak leaned forward slightly, curious but concerned. Then it happened. Linda lifted the now heavy fork to her mouth, opened it wide, and slurped the strings in with a loud, squelching sound that echoed across the chamber like a wet thunderclap. A Siltari diplomat instantly fainted beside Zrak, folding like a water balloon. Several species cried out. One of the plethory beings made of vapor evaporated in sheer shock. Panic rippled through the room. Krell ambassador dropped her wine glass. The ice-based Yill froze mid-bite, literally. Captain Zrak could hardly believe what he was seeing. Among the Siltari, slurping was more than bad manners. It was a cultural offense akin to personal insult. To slurp was to show teeth, to mimic predatory behavior, and to display disregard for silence and dignity. And yet here was this human, smiling, chatting casually, slurping meatballs and noodles as though she were in a family kitchen rather than an interstellar peace conference. Another slurp, more fainting. Some delegates began backing out of the room slowly, as if avoiding a wild animal. The Orcs, a species with 3 nervous systems, began vibrating uncontrollably. Translator. Drones sparked in confusion. The dish, according to one translation attempt, was spaghetti with meatballs. And while that sounded harmless, the way it moved and smelled was anything but. The rich red sauce stained Linda's napkin and the tips of her fingers. Dish gave off a strange scent, sharp, earthy, and spicy. Some believed it was a type of preserved larvae. Others thought it might be a digestive trap, a self-preparing predatory plant. Zrak tried to maintain order, sending calming pulses through his neural translator, but the damage was already done. Linda, still unaware of the chaos she had caused, happily offered her dish to the curious Kaitar ambassador beside her. The brave insectoid took one sniff, blinked all 8 eyes, and then fell stiffly out of his chair. Zrak made a mental note. Humanity had broken galactic protocol again, without even trying. He opened a private channel to Alliance Command, and whispered a single urgent phrase, "We have a code noodle." At that moment, as the smell of garlic and oregano wafted deeper into the ventilation system, Zrak realized something that both fascinated and terrified. Humans were not only unpredictable, they were also impossible to prepare for. Their culture seemed built on contradiction. They smiled while eating things that looked like internal organs. They carried sharp objects in public with no sense of danger. And now they had weaponized their food, or at least it appeared that way. To every species present, and yet Linda wasn't hostile. She was warm, generous, and friendly in the most terrifying way possible. She did not understand that slurping was a galactic offense. She didn't know that twirling food with a pointy rod looked like battle. Preparation to the Krell? She was simply being human. By the time the guards arrived to restore order, most of the banquet had cleared out. The Alliance's first attempt at cultural exchange with Earth had ended not with violence or diplomacy, but with sauce stains and unconscious diplomats. Serac stood in the now empty room, watching as Linda cheerfully packed away the rest of her meal into a plastic container marked leftovers. Shh, she waved at him. You didn't want any? She asked, as if offering something completely harmless. Serac could only blink. His translator failed to respond. There were no words. The human had brought peace. Yes, but peace served with tomato sauce, fermented cheese, ground meat, and red stringy danger. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he began to wonder if this was just lunch. What would dinner look like? Ambassador Linda Martinez stood at the center of the Alliance Tribunal chamber, a wide circular hall lined with glowing columns and floating platforms, each one occupied by a representative of a different intelligent species. 23 alien diplomats stared down at her from various heights and angles, many of them still clearly disturbed by the events of the previous day's banquet. The room buzzed with quiet murmurs and flickering translator lights as they tried to process what had happened. Linda, standing calmly in her neat gray uniform, didn't look like a dangerous person. She smiled politely, her hands behind her back, and waited for someone to speak. Captain Zrak was present as an official observer, his eye stalks focused on Linda with cautious curiosity. Finally, a tall, feather-covered being known as a Harthan leaned forward from its perch and adjusted its voice modulator. What? It said slowly. Is this spaghetti? The translator hiccuped at the word, unsure of the pronunciation. There was an awkward silence. Linda blinked, then let out a small laugh. Oh, spaghetti. Just food, she said, cheerful as always. A carbohydrate-based dish from Earth. Long pasta noodles, tomato sauce, meatballs if you like, and lots of cheese. It's originally from Italy. The members of the tribunal glanced at one another, most of them visibly more confused than before. One of the Urians, a gas-based life form inside a floating orb, released a loud squealing sound, which translated roughly to, that looked like a living creature. Another alien whispered something about string-shaped parasites. Linda held up her hands. No, it's not alive. It's cooked wheat flour and water. You boil it. Totally safe, though. If you leave it in the fridge too long, it might fight back. She chuckled at her own joke, but no one else laughed. The tribunal was not amused. The Krell representative, whose body shimmered with shifting crystals, slammed a tendril on the platform. You violated the Treaty of Shared Presence. You brought unregistered biological material to a cross-species event. Linda raised an eyebrow. It's lunch. Captain Zrak sighed softly and sent a private message to command. Human. Appears unaware of consequences. Still smiling. The Varnaxi delegate, a slow-moving tree-like creature with gentle green leaves, suddenly shifted and extended a vine. I wish to try this. Food. The room gasped. Even Linda looked surprised. But she opened her small travel container and pulled out a neatly sealed sample wrapped in foil. Here you go, she said, handing it over with a plastic fork. The Varnaxi examined the sample, unwrapped it carefully, sniffed the sauce, and slowly consumed a single meatball. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The leaves on its branches began to glow faintly. A low humming sound filled the air. A second later, the Varnaxi entered what their kind called deep photosynthesis mode, which looked very much like a trance. The tree being stood perfectly still, lights flickering across its bark, whispering the word sunlight over and over in a peaceful voice. For a full minute, no one spoke. The tribunal was frozen in confusion. Linda looked around. Is that normal for them? Captain Zrak checked his datapad. It appears the sauce contains compounds that simulate high-energy solar absorption, possibly a nutrient overload. I believe you may have jump-started their seasonal bloom cycle. Linda scratched her head. I did use sun-dried tomatoes. Scientists in the observation deck scrambled to analyze the sample. Reports came in quickly. The sauce had over 12 compounds not found in any registered food product across the Alliance. Some acted like mild stimulants. Others triggered memory centers in the brain. One ingredient known to humans as garlic caused temporary euphoria in the insectoid species. Another, Parmesan cheese, bonded to certain molecules in the atmosphere. creating what one scientist described as emotional gravity. The tribunal demanded a full report. "Is it a biological weapon?" asked the Nervar diplomat. "Is it a mind control dish?" asked another. Linda shook her head. "It's just spaghetti. On Earth, people eat it all the time. We have whole restaurants that only serve different kinds of pasta." The diplomat stared at her, shocked. "You eat this regularly?" asked the Grelk, a water-dwelling being. "Yes," said Linda. "We even argue over it. Some people think pineapple doesn't belong on pizza. Others fight about whether meatballs should be on the pasta or served separately. We've had entire family wars over pasta sauce." She paused, "But usually we make up after dessert." Tribunal leaned back in stunned silence. "This dish," said the Harthan slowly, "does not follow logic. It nourishes, it soothes, it causes photosynthetic overload. It induces emotional responses. It divides households. It ... confuses us." Captain Zarak finally spoke. Summary: humanity has created a single dish that unites and confounds at the same time. A meal that causes laughter, sleep, debates, and accidental enlightenment. Linda nodded. "Basically, yes. We call it Tuesday." At that moment, the tribunal members exchanged slow, silent nods, each trying to process this new piece of Terran culture. The Varnaxi remained glowing. The scientists were still running tests. Few species began requesting recipes. And Zarak realized, not for the first time, that humans were not dangerous because of their weapons, or technology, or even their strength. They were dangerous because they turned everything, even lunch, into something mysterious, absurd, and unforgettable within just 72 galactic hours of the spaghetti incident. The calm order of interstellar civilization had begun to unravel like overcooked pasta. News of the Terran dish, known as spaghetti with meatballs, spread faster than a solar flare through hyperspace. What had started as a minor diplomatic disruption was now a full-blown phenomenon. Every species that had seen or heard of the meal became obsessed with curiosity, others with alarm, and a few with spiritual reverence. Illegal recipe exchanges popped up on the data webs of 12 planets. Food printers were hacked to replicate Earth pasta patterns. Tentacle-compatible forks were manufactured in bulk by the Duralians. And black market sauce packets were sold in shady side corridors of trading hubs. The Siltari High Council, known for their strict control over foreign influences, tried issuing a culinary containment directive, but it was too late. The cultural spice had already seeped into the stars. Captain Zrak, now promoted to Cultural Crisis Liaison, found himself drowning in emergency reports. His datapad blinked, non-stop with updates from across the galaxy. On planet Gronth, the Korlaxians, a beetle-shelled race with a rigid belief in logical order, had inexplicably started a meatball worship cult. They claimed that the round shape of the meatball symbolized eternal unity and began rolling giant replicas through their cities and ceremonial parades. When questioned, the High Priest of Sauce simply stated, "We have tasted the truth." Meanwhile, on the Yeli homeworld, the government panicked and declared all forms of pasta illegal, fearing it might unbalance the fragile social harmony they had maintained for centuries. But banning spaghetti backfired spectacularly. Riots broke out. Citizens poured tomato puree into government fountains. A rebel group called the Fettuccine Front took control of 5 major cities and replaced official statues with towering noodles carved from stone. The Yeli prime leader resigned. Back on Earth, humans were mostly confused. Ambassador Linda Martinez, still unaware of the scale of the chaos she had sparked, was busy filming a lighthearted cooking segment titled Pasta Across the Stars. But the Galactic Alliance was no longer treating her as a simple ambassador. Without any formal ceremony, she was assigned the title of Culinary Ambassador General, a position that had never existed until now. Her job? To manage and contain the spread of Earth's edible diplomacy. But even she couldn't slow it down. By the end of the week, Earth received a new message from the Alliance. Humanity was being invited, begged to host the first Universal Cooking Olympics. It would be held on a neutral asteroid with perfect gravity for soufflés and orbital seating for up to 10 billion spectators. Competitions would include speed, sauce crafting, zero-gravity lasagna assembly, and synchronized noodle tossing. Zerk, observing from the Alliance's orbiting command center, watched in silent disbelief as thousands of species submitted culinary teams. Entire cultures were shifting their focus from energy efficiency and science to cuisine. Galactic weapon engineers were being retrained as pasta machine designers. Some species stopped their border disputes to compete in interplanetary garlic bread duel day. Zarak couldn't decide if this was diplomacy or disaster. More troubling was the fact that new side effects were being discovered. The Varnock Sea, still glowing from their earlier encounter with spaghetti, had begun broadcasting music from their bark in the form of rhythmic humming, a new genre that was being called saw-synth. Meanwhile, the aquatic species of the Zelna, Trench reported that certain pasta types increased their brain activity and led to creative breakthroughs in bubble-based mathematics. Scientists tried to analyze what was happening. How could one dish's simple mix of noodles, sauce, and meat cause a galactic wave of emotional, intellectual, and cultural transformation? But no answer satisfied anyone. Some said it was the balance of ingredients. Others whispered about ancient Terran culinary instincts. A few began to fear it was only the beginning. Zrak stood in the observation lounge of the Serenity of Thought, staring out at the swirling colors of space, trying to find reason in the madness. He had dealt with wormhole leaks, black hole near misses, and even time travel paradoxes. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for noodles. And the worst part was, he was starting to get curious. Though Siltari had no mouths, no stomachs, no digestive systems at all, he still found himself wondering, what does spaghetti taste like? Was this how it began? One harmless question. And then the fall? He sent a message to the Medical Ethics Council, request urgent research on cross-species culinary influence. Risk of emotional contagion rising. And deep inside, a quiet thought whispered across his neural thread. What if this isn't the peak of it? What if humans have even stranger dishes? The moment passed, but the suspicion remained. Tap! Sirach now understood something that no report could explain. Humans weren't just strange. They weren't just chaotic. They were contagious. Their ideas, their food, their jokes, they slipped into systems like unnoticed viruses, cheerful and unassuming, and rewired entire societies before anyone realized what was happening. The noodle crisis wasn't ending. It was just beginning. In the far corners of the galaxy, not everyone was thrilled by the rise of noodles. And while many species celebrated spaghetti with joy, music, and glowing tree hymns, one powerful civilization looked upon Earth's cultural explosion with deep concern and growing disgust. The Obrexians, beings of precision and discipline, who consumed only pure biofuel derived from mineral vapor, considered carbohydrates a filthy and unnecessary indulgence. Their society, made entirely of hexagonal logic and clean energy, viewed food not as culture, but as function, and when they saw the chaos, joy, and even peace spreading from the human invention of pasta, they saw it as contamination. Their leaders gathered in a sterile white hall, surrounded by humming data walls and floating fuel core sensors, and decided that enough was enough. The Obrexians formed what they called the Anti-Carb League, a unified force against the spread of starch-based influence. Within 2 days, they issued a silent warning to the Galactic Alliance, claiming that if Earth continued to promote edible instability, action would be taken. Their warning was ignored, partly because the rest of the Alliance was too busy tasting garlic knots. So the Obrexians did what they always did when diplomacy failed. They launched a missile. But not just any missile. This was the Starch Purge Alpha, a long-range precision device capable of scanning planetary atmospheres for carbohydrate molecules and destabilizing them with an engineered burst of zero-calorie plasma. A weapon that could wipe pasta, bread, and even cookies from existence. Quietly, with no announcement, it was fired from a deep space silo hidden behind the moons of Obrex Prime. Locked on course for Earth, by the time Alliance scanners picked it up, it was already passing Neptune. Panic spread quickly across the communication channels. Some species demanded evacuation, others tried to negotiate. and some were still too busy learning how to make ravioli. Captain Drac, who had seen madness unfold ever since the spaghetti incident, immediately contacted Earth. But Earth's response came not from a military general or a scientist, but from Linda Martinez, who at that very moment was standing in front of a crowd at a live broadcast cooking demonstration, explaining the delicate layering of lasagna. As soon as the missile alert reached her earpiece, she paused mid-sentence, gently placed down her spatula, and calmly turned to the camera with a smile. "Excuse me," she said. "I think it's time for Plan B." She walked off stage, followed by a stunned camera crew, and entered a small, hidden command room beneath the culinary pavilion in Geneva. There, under layers of kitchen equipment and tomato-scented insulation, was a terminal labeled Project Gluten Shield, authorized by the Alliance, but only known to Linda and 3 Earth diplomats with chef's licenses. This emergency planetary defense system had been launched earlier that year in Secretor, rather. An embarrassment after the first signs of interstellar pasta obsession. The project had been laughed at by many, ignored by more, and funded mostly by leftover cooking show sponsorships. But now, it was Earth's only hope. With a few simple taps on the holographic screen, Linda activated the Gluten Shield, a chain of orbiting defense satellites shaped like massive golden brown breadsticks, each equipped with auto-targeting marinara delivery cannons. These satellites spun slowly in Earth's upper orbit, warming under the sun and smelling faintly of rosemary and melted butter. The moment the missile crossed into Earth's defensive perimeter, the breadsticks locked on, aimed, and fired. A concentrated stream of high-pressure tomato sauce infused with basil oil and emergency-grade Parmesan particles. The collision was instant. Sauce met warhead in a glorious, silent explosion of red, green, and white light. The missile was neutralized mid-flight, disintegrated not by violence, but by flavor. The skies above Mars shimmered with tiny flakes of oregano. The sauce rained gently across the Martian plains, seeping into the soil, and according to later reports, causing an unexpected boost in local algae growth, leading scientists to wonder if Earth's spaghetti might actually be useful for terraforming. The Galactic Alliance, stunned by both the attack and the defense, convened an emergency meeting where Linda presented her security report with a slideshow titled "Peace Through Pasta." Her calm tone, combined with the undeniable effectiveness of the Gluten Shield, silenced critics. Captain Zarak, watching from the corner of the assembly, no longer knew whether to be impressed, horrified, or simply resigned. He had once feared that humans were chaotic and careless, but now he saw something more subtle, an ability to turn absurdity into strategy, kindness into strength, and food into weapons of peace. Linda was awarded a second title, Defender of Culinary Unity, and the Alliance formally banned starch-targeting weapons. The Obrexians, embarrassed and diplomatically isolated, were asked to undergo cultural re-evaluation sessions with Earth's food diplomacy corps, starting with a gentle tasting of macaroni and cheese. And as the stars settled back into their usual rhythm, and Earth's orbit was once again calm and faintly tomato-scented, Zrak sent one final message to the Siltari High Council. The humans have turned bread into shields and sauce into salvation. We must prepare. They have not yet introduced ... dessert. The Galactic Alliance, after much debate and more than one emergency session, finally issued an official classification. Spaghetti was now labeled a Class 3 cultural disruptor, a title previously reserved for sentient soap operas and telepathic laughter crystals. It meant that spaghetti was not just food, it was a phenomenon with the power to alter societies, inspire revolutions, and accidentally terraform planets. The decision was made after reviewing the events of the past month from the meatball worship cult on Corlax 9 to the sudden discovery that tomato sauce could improve Martian algae fertility. And while most of the galaxy returned to their daily routines, something had changed. In homes, on stations, and in orbiting cafes, beings from all walks of life were trying their own versions of Earth's cuisine. Some succeeded. Others started small fires. But the energy of exploration, the joy of taste, and the odd feeling of unity that came from sharing something so deeply weird had spread. And at the center of it all was Linda Martinez, still smiling, still cooking, and now officially the galaxy's first culinary ambassador general and defender of culinary unity, Captain Zrak of the Sultari, who had once seen humans as a minor curiosity, now wore a soft cotton apron embroidered with the words, "Kiss the Captain, a gift from Linda." Of course, he didn't fully understand the message, but the cloth was surprisingly comfortable, and wearing it seemed to confuse other ambassadors just enough to keep meetings shorter. As he floated in his personal quarters aboard the Serenity of Thought, gently adjusting his eye stalks toward the large observation window, he reflected on the strange journey he had witnessed. Humans had not invented faster-than-light travel, they still bought those drives from the Talon. They hadn't cured galactic hiccups, which continued to plague 3 species and 1 moon. They hadn't figured out how to speak in color like the Lumari or sing underwater with the Ternari, but they had invented Parmesan cheese in a can. And with that invention alongside plastic forks, microwave burritos, and emotional support coffee mugs, they had made an entire galaxy question. Its taste, its habits, and even its sense of what truly mattered. Zrak tapped his communication console and sent a short message to the Cultural Archive Council. Humans remain unpredictable. Recommend observation continue indefinitely. Do not, under any circumstances, ban carbs. He had just finished logging the final report when a message popped up from Earth. Linda was hosting another demonstration, and she had invited several diplomats to watch live. Zrak sighed, but accepted the invitation. He had learned that resistance was pointless when it came to humans. The broadcast began with upbeat music and cheerful narration. Linda stood behind a sleek kitchen station with ingredients neatly prepared in bowls. "Today," she said, smiling at the camera, "we'll be exploring a dish that has caused more debate on Earth than politics, sports, and taxes combined." Zrak leaned closer. "We're making pizza," she continued, her voice full of excitement, "but not just any pizza. This is pineapple pizza." A hush fell across the conference channel. On multiple ships, ambassadors leaned forward. Some beings blinked in alarm. One fish-shaped species accidentally swam backward into their monitor. Zrak froze. Pineapple on pizza? He quickly searched the Alliance food database and found dozens of articles warning about the controversial nature of this dish. On Earth, it had caused lifelong friendships to break, family dinners to end early, and forums to explode with passionate arguments. Now Linda was presenting it to the galaxy. She gently placed pineapple chunks on a layer of cheese, humming a soft Earth tune as she worked. "Some love it, some hate it," she said. "But like all food, it's about trying something new." The oven closed with a warm beep. Minutes passed. Then came the moment. The pizza was pulled from the oven golden, bubbling with glistening. Slices of pineapple shining like gemstones in a sea of melted cheese and tomato. Linda took a bite. She smiled. Then slowly, she turned to the camera and offered a slice to the galaxy. "Who wants to try?" she asked. Zrak's eye stalks twitched. Across the stars, many stared. No one moved. Then a brave ambassador from the Ice World Freister reached out and said, "I will." Others followed. The slice was digitally transmitted. Via culinary simulation pods, some screamed, some cried. One being began composing poetry about the taste. But Zrak could not take it. The sweetness, the heat, the mixture of fruit and cheese, it defied logic. His neural threads flickered. His translator stuttered. The room spun. And then, slowly, gracefully, and without a single sound, Captain Zrak fainted, apron and all, drifting gently to the floor like a tired jellyfish on vacation. As medical drones floated in, the screen faded to black. The stars outside the ship shimmered as if they, too, were unsure how to process what they had just witnessed. Somewhere in the distance, a planetary orchestra began composing a symphony titled Harmony in Ham and Pineapple. Back on Earth, Linda took another bite and said softly, "We're just getting started."